everyone. My name is Ryan Gregoire, and I am your association's legislative director. I'm joined by my colleague Dave Lucas today, the NYSAC Director of Intergovernmental Affairs and Finance. We're bringing to you a special NYSAC News video update discussing the state of the state. Today is Monday, January 11th. Governor Cuomo has announced a four-part series of the state of the state this year, which is a little different than the historic years. And they're all being done in this virtual environment that we're all living in. He presented today's message, Dave, in the war room of the New York State Capitol building. It's a pretty significant venue within our Capitol. There's a lot of historic elements there. It really served as a nice backdrop to his speech overall. For our listeners, the speech was void of any large-scale, new, earth-shattering priorities. What the governor was really focused on today was outlining a 7-point plan on how to set the state up to get us through this COVID-19 pandemic and really focus on rebuilding New York State for the future. So the 7-point plan, just briefly, talked about defeating the COVID-19 virus, vaccinating all New Yorkers, managing the short-term economic crisis the state is facing, investing in our future, seizing the opportunity to make New York shift to a green economy, understanding the long-term effects of COVID, and addressing systemic injustices. So again, with me, I've got Dave Lucas. We just wanted to have an iterative conversation, give everyone an update on what the governor covered today, and we'll be providing you with more updates later this week as more initiatives and more details on the state of the state come out. So with that, Dave, what did you think of the governor's plan?
Well, I do have to give the governor credit for thinking big. He always tends to think very big in his proposals. As a typical state of the state is, it does lack a lot of details, so it's really hard to tell how the things would get implemented as we go. Something I did find in it, just from my own vantage point of having worked in Washington for almost 15 years, there's a lot of reliance on the federal government to do something here to help New York State. He wanted $15 billion to address the short-term fiscal consequences that have damaged our economy as we responded to COVID. He's potentially looking for the repeal of SALT. That's the state and local tax deduction that was enacted in December of 2017. I think we need to put this in perspective. That is an $80 billion a year cost to the federal government to repeal SALT.
Wow.
Over the multiple years of the tax cut, we're talking $600-700 billion. That's not a small thing to be asking the federal government to do. We were adversely impacted, but these are very big proposals. Also, he gave a little reference to the federal medical assistance percentage. The federal government pays a portion of Medicaid, and we do have the lowest rate in the country, a reimbursement rate, along with probably 8 or 10 other states. And we tend to be wealthier states. The more income you have in your state, the lower your matches from the federal government. Those are all really big things that he talked about as managing the short-term economic crisis. So we really need to see the details of the proposal to figure out, what is this budget really going to look like if this money doesn't come through. I mean, he painted a pretty devastating picture, and it's very concerning as the counties having to implement much of this initiative. But he definitely is thinking big here. Infrastructure, very positive. And some of the other things, if you want to talk about the transportation pieces and some of the things we've been looking for, we've been promoting broadband for a long time in our counties, in addition to cellular.
And it's interesting you bring up FMAP, the Enhanced Federal Medicaid match from the federal government, and the direct unrestricted aid for the state and the county governments. This is something that NYSAC and the counties across the state are in complete alignment with our governor on. We have been in lockstep over the last 9 months, Dave, advocating for and working with Senator Schumer, and we should give some credit to Senator Schumer for getting the 6.2% increase to FMAP is part of an earlier version of the coronavirus coronavirus relief package back in March of last year. But, this is something that we're going to continue to fight for at the federal level. And you just talked briefly about transportation issues. That was another key item the governor highlighted today. He talked about making investments in transportation and infrastructure. He highlighted broadband as one of those categories. Certainly, we've been working to advance broadband deployment across the state. Last year, we really put on a strong advocacy push to get cellular expansion, particularly in our more rural and more difficult to serve areas. So I think speaking for the NYSAC team, we're definitely interested in seeing what that's going to look like. As you mentioned, the devil's in the details, but it's really going to be important to see what that looks like going into the future here. What about the governor's note of investing in our future, Dave? And he talked about, adult use cannabis legalization and mobile sports gaming revenue. What's the association's positions on those two policies? How do we fit into the mix on that?
Yeah, we do run the county public health departments, and we do a lot with substance abuse and mental health counseling for people that are struggling with addictions. And I think as a body, we've never really had an official position on, should we be legalizing cannabis for adult recreational use or not?
Right.
Our issue has always been, if you do this, we need to make sure that there's resources in the community and for the counties to support this, which would include, providing some sort of revenue stream back to the counties where the product is being sold to help address these issues, and also in the areas of the state where we might be cultivating the product, that there should be some sort of resources for those communities. I think when you look at it at the end of the day, you're not going to probably will not have a marijuana dispensary in every single county in the state, because it's just the volume isn't there. It's going to be concentrated in the urban areas. So you don't want to have this disparity where it's only benefiting or there's only enough resources in the area where the product's sold, knowing full well that whoever buys it's going to go back to their home and use it. So that's sort of been our position, and it's similar on even with online sports betting. We've been advocating for that for a while. There's been some arguments or discussions with the governor's office on whether that's even legal under the Constitution, and he seems to be coming around now to say yes, possibly it is, and maybe it's something we'll do at the state-sponsored level, which I don't really understand what that means either. It's something, again, where we need more detail on these proposals. But then again, there we have local off-track betting facilities that provide a revenue stream to counties, which could be impacted from these proposals. The other thing I found in there, too, that was interesting is, his ambitions on infrastructure are always really impressive. The idea of, when I worked in Washington, I did spend time with Senator Moynihan, and I remember him talking about, we got to get rid of Penn Station because it's just an underground hellhole that it was not very impressive, and it wasn't a good first impression for people coming to New York City. And he was talking about turning the Farley post office into the new Penn Station, and it took almost 30 years for that to happen. And this governor kind of took the initiative, and everybody said it can't be done, we'll never get the money, and they got it done. And I was just reading today that one of his other proposals is to connect the Skyway directly into Moynihan train station, and I think that's just a cool idea, where it's recreational space and it'll flood right into the central part of the city. People could come and go. It'll be easy to access it from different parts of Manhattan. So it's a very bold vision on that front. It's just a question of where do the resources come for this? Is the federal government going to have to be part of the funding for these giant infrastructure projects, because we can't do it on our own? But that'll be a key issue. I did like a lot of the green economy stuff as well. I know you've been working on some things related to electric charging stations and electric vehicles, even when your time in the county. I know you were interested in purchasing cars that were electric for your fleet, but I think it's good to be in the forefront of those types of industries, because they will be jobs for the future.
Sure. Well, I think for our listeners, you've heard from Dave and myself, there's still a lot of unanswered questions out there. We have to identify the resources to implement these policies. We have to listen to what the governor is going to be outlining over the next couple days. This is, again, part one of a four-part series for the 2021 State of the State, and it's been brought to you by the NYSAC News Video Update. Looking forward to seeing everyone again in the near future, and thank you very much. Have a great day.
Be safe.